Hello, and welcome to CNAS Stories, the interview series that delves into the fascinating world of the College of Natural and Agricultural Sciences, a.k.a. CNAS, here at UCR. I'm your host, Jeremy McWells, the Associate Director of Development for CNAS, and I'm thrilled to have you join us here today. In this series, we bring you the stories behind the brilliant minds, groundbreaking research, and incredible achievements within our college. Now, if this is your first time on the channel, make sure to subscribe and also give us a thumbs up to make sure that you like this video and show your support. Today, we have a special guest who is kicking off our first episode of the series. And without further ado, please welcome the director of the UCR Botanic Gardens, Dr. Jodi Holt. Dr. Holt, thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you doing, first and foremost?
I'm doing great, and I'm really honored to be the first person interviewed.
Our inaugural episode here. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here with us today. So in my notes, I usually say, or I was going to say, for every episode, we like to start it off with tell us your UCR Highlander story, but you're our first one. So actually we could just jump right into it. How did you come across UCR, and how did this particular place separate itself from other stops that you've had in your career?
Well, my first answer is not going to be very exciting because I had not really heard of UCR. I was in graduate school getting my PhD in botany at UC Davis. I was nearing the end, enjoying myself greatly. I hadn't thought much about jobs, and my major professor one day handed me a job announcement and said, "You should apply for this job." And I said, "I'm not really ready." And he said, "Well, it sounds like it was written for you. It'd be good practice." So I went ahead and applied. It was for a professor of plant physiology, assistant professor in the botany and plant sciences department. Got an interview, came and interviewed, and just fell in love with the place. And the collegiality and the fact that I could continue to do what I've been doing and get paid for it was just a dream. So I think many faculty feel that way. You do what you love and you're getting paid for it in a wonderful place.
Absolutely. And how long have you been here exactly at UCR?
Over 40 years.
Yeah.
I worked as a faculty member for about 30 years and then retired and came back to work after a year at the request of the dean to be the new director of the UCR Botanic Gardens.
What an honor. And in terms of your time spent here, what separated your experience with this place, UCR, to, other places that you heard of, come across? What makes this place so special for you?
It's interesting because starting out not knowing much about UCR, although I was in the UC system, I quickly learned that UCR was sort of a smaller, under-the-radar school, university. And over my career, I have visited, traveled, given lectures, hosted other faculty, and interviewed and been offered other jobs, and always felt like remaining here because I just really love my job. I love the community of people. And the sense from the very beginning that we were all building this campus together. If you do your homework, you can look back and see I came when the student body was total 6,000, long time ago. And now I just read yesterday that the fall, we're heading to 26,000. But we still retain a tremendous sense of community among the people that work here. So this isn't a job, it's a career and a way of life. And I just love and have looked at other schools, but love coming back to UCR for that reason. Yeah. And I didn't just make that up for your interview. Right. I mean, I really feel that way.
Absolutely. And from personal experience and seeing you kind of work through day to day, I could tell that UCR is a part of you, which is really good to see. It really is. In terms of a unique opportunity, what unique opportunity for such a unique institution that have you been involved in your time, in your various roles, but maybe specifically the director of the Botanic Gardens? What's been a unique experience for you?
Well, I think throughout my career, I didn't view myself as someone who loved change, but I quickly learned that in academia, and particularly as faculty, things change rapidly, even though it doesn't seem so to the outside world. So I had graduate students in my labs, and you mentor them to have their future of their desire. You teach students to go out and be more aware of botany as they go seek whatever careers they want. And I was department chair for 7 years, and then a divisional dean. And so I think I really grew through all these opportunities and discovered that what I really love is being in a position that's a little bit beyond or above what I was doing and having an opportunity to make a difference to a lot of people by just doing things that are interesting and fun for me to do make a big impact on other people's lives. So the gardens, when I retired, we were looking around, or we traveled a lot, and I thought a lot about what I wanted to do. And when I was asked by the dean if I would come back and be the director, I didn't want to not be retired. I didn't want to work full time, but I thought, what a grand opportunity to take everything I learned as a faculty member, researcher, teacher, administrator, and apply it in this environment where I'm basically teaching botany in an outdoor environment and providing a place where people can come be in nature and enjoy the things I'm very passionate about. So
now you also, I didn't know this, but you also had an opportunity to connect your discipline, your field, to a movie. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit? Because I had no idea, and I thought it was really, really cool.
This sort of like my first, how I learned about UCR. Right. This was just one of these serendipitous things. A cold call came into the chair of botany, asking for a field botanist to consult on a movie. And my first thought was, well, they probably want to know where poison oak is so they can avoid it when they're filming. Long story short, it was John Landau's office, who was producing with Jim Cameron the first Avatar movie. They needed a field botanist to work with Sigourney Weaver and show her what a field botanist does, how one dresses and acts, samples plants, and to really consult and advise and give credibility to the plants they had designed for this planet, moon, that was not at all like Earth. And that initiated about a 3-year relationship of my learning what it's like to work in the arts community. I came away just totally impressed with the level of ability to learn and understand things beyond their own training and experience. There were no scientists on set but me, but the level of intellect that they brought to this whole endeavor was astounding. I also came away thinking that the media and movies are not a day job for a botanist. There are not many calls for a botanist, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. I bet. Did
you catch the movie by chance afterwards, after all
we
the work
went to the cast and crew screening at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, and everybody in the theater saw his or her name in the credits. It was pretty fabulous. And then we went to the crew party and saw all the actors and got a little bit of that.
That's cool. That's cool.
A little bit of association with that.
A superstar on and off campus, truly.
Got my 15 minutes of fame.
There you go.
My dad started calling me botanist to the stars.
As he should.
But work dried up after that. So I kept my day job.
Fair. Speaking of the gardens, I want to transition into the origins of the gardens. How did the Botanic Gardens at UCR come to be exactly?
It's a long story, which I will actually maybe refer you to our newsletter.
Okay, perfect.
In the issue immediately prior to this current one that just came out, and these are all on our website under news, I wrote a short history of how the gardens came about. So UCR was first established here in the early 50s, and the Citrus Experiment Station in Riverside that had been established in about 1902 was brought out to the site of our field station now. And when the campus was built, departments were forming. And so a couple of botanists were hired from the Midwest who were then tasked with teaching the California flora to the students. And they had no idea what grew in California. So they started rallying other faculty who were teaching to petition the leadership to build a garden so they could plant California native plants to study and use for teaching. And that whole concept of a teaching and research garden sort of grew into the concept of a botanic garden, which was formalized in 1963. And at that time, the 40 acres that are now the garden was simply a fairly bare grass and shrubland, similar to what you see when you look up the Box Springs Mountains and you see the sea up behind campus. And you can see that there's a lot of grass and rocks and some shrubs and everything's low growing. That's what the entire acreage looked like. So if you visit the gardens now, every tree, every shrub, every plant, every building has been put in place by hand since 1963. And I just learned when I wrote this little news article that the property housed a stable And the deans at that time kept their horses there so they could get the horses and ride to the field station and check the fields. So we were a farming community back then, a ranching community.
Wow. Such history with the gardens, truly. When it comes to, you mentioned the teaching aspect. Can you give us some examples of some in-field teaching experiences that you've been a part of in both sides, or even as your time as a director of the gardens?
So as a faculty member, I taught, as I said, things change every few years and your teaching assignments change. And so I taught ecology, plant physiology, and things that had field and outdoor components. The class I taught the longest, which I think I really loved the most, was a general botany to students who were largely not botany majors. They were biology majors. And we always brought them to the Botanic Gardens for a field lab. So now, as director of the gardens, we have an educational program, and what I see is that we do host a lot of classes from UCR, labs, field trips, but probably the most impactful educational component in the gardens is a tour program for schools that has been in place for, I'm guessing, 20 or 25 years. So our curator teaches a training class for docents. Schools, the teachers will go online to our website, find the link for tours, sign up, verify their insurance and all that, because they're going to bring a lot of children. They sign up. We have a volunteer who assigns a docent, and the children get a 1-hour tour in outdoor environmental science that is grade appropriate and specific, that fulfills the state teaching requirements for schools from grades 2 to 12. I think you could probably go into almost any home in Riverside and ask everyone in the home, have you heard of the UCR Botanic Gardens? And the first hand that would go up will be the children, because they've been on field trips. And then the parents might have been told about it and come because of their children. So I think in terms of sheer impact, that program is just truly amazing.
Agreed. So. And you just helped me segue into the next question. The Botanic Gardens really are such a staple in the Riverside community. Why do people love Botanic Gardens, you think, outside from the children, the kids, right? Why do people just have such a love and a care for this special place?
I've thought about this for a long time, even further back than when I was director. And when I first became director, the directors of the UC, there are 5 UC gardens, came together to, kind of get coordinated. And we all talked about what was the special thing that made our gardens unique. And I went last because I was new and didn't know what to say. And so everybody talked about the unique qualities of their gardens. And I realized that what people really love our garden for is, we live in the Inland Empire. There are 3 million people within 25 miles of us. If you want to go out in nature, you've got to drive an hour and a half to the mountains, drive to the desert, go through traffic. You can come to the UCR Botanic Gardens and really lose yourself on some of our trails where you don't see buildings, you don't see urban sprawl, you don't see roads. So it is really a nature oasis people just like to get out in. And they learn about plants and they see a lot of wildlife and all those things too. But I think that's really what draws people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It is its own oasis, if you will. It feels like you're not even in a city. It feels like you're really out in the wilderness, which I'm sure is a nice break for folks as well.
Especially early in the day. I do that sometimes, go out and walk way up in the back and you hear birds and you think, I walked here. I didn't get in my car. It's just wonderful. You kind of forget where exactly you are, which I think is really nice for people. Can we talk about any notable events that have taken place in the gardens over the past few years, or certainly during your time as director? Maybe we could start there, and anything that comes to mind, if you wanted to share with the audience, would be great. Well, we have a lot of events that happen on a regular basis that we put on. Most have stayed over the years, but I think the one that, when you say the word notable, the one that most jumps out at me is the summer of 22. I was actually away and I got an urgent call from the curator saying, our corpse plant is going to bloom and we got about a week. So, there's also an article in an older newsletter about it. This is a very rare tropical plant. It produces the largest inflorescence in the world, meaning flower cluster. It basically looks like a 5-foot tall corn cob when it opens, with a big burgundy skirt around it, if you can imagine. And usually the plant produces a giant leaf every year, and then the leaf dies, and the next year it produces a leaf. And when the underground corm or storage material is large enough, it'll send up one of these giant inflorescences. So Janine, our curator, sensed that maybe this was the year for the flowering. And so she called me. I contacted Joanne and the other media folks, John Warren and all the campus media folks. They mobilized within hours. I was just so impressed and honored that they would. And by that evening, we had video cameras, time-lapse photography. And I was going over there every 3 hours to change the cards and the cameras. We had an all-night vigil. And when the plant finally bloomed, we rapidly gathered all our volunteers and hosted a viewing on a Saturday. Well, we weren't normally open, and we had almost 1,800 people in 3 hours line up to come see it. So it was really spectacular.
Were you shocked to see that many people come out and support?
I was. And I like what I enjoy, particularly in terms of your earlier question about teaching and education about something I'm passionate about, which is botany and the role of plants. I like to just walk around and say hello to people and hear their stories about what brings them to the gardens. And I met people at that event. One woman brought her father, who had wanted he was from the Philippines, and he had wanted to see one of these plants bloom his entire life and had never seen one.
Wow.
She drove down to LA and got him and brought him.
Wow.
So, I mean, stories. There was another woman who showed up who had already made a shirt with a drawing on it. She loved this plant. It was really fun. That's Everybody awesome. Had a connection. And if not, they wanted to find out what the fuss was about because the TAP's parking enforcement truck was trying to figure out what to do with 1,800, visitors on short notice. Right. And they showed up and they said, we just parked the car and came in. We don't know what to do. And they got in line to go see it. So, I mean, it was a UCR event through and through. It was just fabulous.
It was, with the best name for the flower, by the way. The best name.
A little botany. This is one of the plants in the world that when it blooms, it smells so bad. You just have to hold your nose because it's pollinated by dung beetles and things, insects that eat dying things. So it's called a corpse plant. So the people that walked through the greenhouse to see it were doing this or pulling their shirts up over their noses. So it's a complete experience.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. When you walk into the gardens, one thing I've noticed, and I was just there maybe a few weeks ago to take a couple of pictures for some donors, you notice a variety of plants that are there. Can we talk about the collection that you all have at the gardens? I mean, there's so many, and I'm sure you could be here for a long time talking about each one, but maybe some standout ones that you really enjoy.
Well, the collection really started to be built in 1963. And over the years, of course, plants come and go and have been added. We estimate at the current time there are over 3,500 species with over 10,000 accessions, which means an individual plant. So, of course, there are multiples of some species. And the gardens are sort of laid out over a hilly terrain. And so there are a lot of microclimates with different zones and pockets where you can plant things that don't ordinarily grow well in Riverside. So we have a coast redwood grove, in fact, which really is a plant that rarely grows south of Mendocino because it needs a very cool, shady, foggy environment. But down in this base of an arroyo where ours grow, they do reasonably well. They're not 325 feet tall like the ones on the North Coast, but they're coast redwoods. We have beautiful desert gardens, a Southwest desert garden, a South African desert garden, because of course we live on the edge of a desert environment, and so those plants grow well. And then we have plants that represent Mediterranean climates from around the world, which is our climate, where it is rainy in the winter and then dry in the hot summer, which supports a really unique flora in certain areas of the world. And we have all those represented in the gardens. So you can learn a lot about plant geography and ecology just by walking around. But we also have rose gardens, which are probably the most popular part of the gardens. People beeline for the rose gardens. And then they run to the turtle pond to see the turtles.
Right, of course. Yeah. You got to see the turtles. It's a must. In terms of folks who may be seeing this, watching this, who want to get involved with their time, volunteer opportunities, can you go over that just in case some folks want to get more involved with the gardens moving forward?
Thank you for asking that, because we have currently, from an early beginning in the 60s with 2 staff, we currently have 10 staff that are not students. We have 7 students. The staff are part-time and full-time, but this is a huge array of people, but not for 40 acres. So we have a very active volunteer program, and many people want to volunteer in various ways. Volunteers participate in horticulture, they help with events, they do a lot of different things. And the best way, if anybody is interested in volunteering, is to go to our website, which is gardens.ucr.edu. And then along the top, we have links. There's one that says volunteer, and there's a little interest form where you just say, I'm interested in volunteering, and here's my information. And then we contact you. There is no botanic garden in the world that can operate without volunteers.
True.
So we have about 250 registered volunteers.
Wow.
We have probably 20 or 30 who come once or twice or 3 times a week. Another maybe 30 who volunteer for plant sales or certain events. And so everybody can find a role. And I think the thing that's most compelling is that people volunteer in the gardens or any garden because they love outdoors, being outdoors, gardens, and they quickly find that they're joining a community and making great friends. So we have groups of volunteers that make sure they all come on the same day as their friends.
Yeah, that's nice.
The Rosebuds and the Thursday crew. And so they give themselves a name, and they just take care of things. We just step back and appreciate them. So.
And if you don't have any particular, if you don't have a green thumb or gardening experience or anything related, okay,
you just have to be interested and willing. We train you. Once we get the interest form, our events we have an engagement coordinator now, Nancy, and she will contact the person, do a little orientation, determine where the best fit is, how often they want to work. We're getting a lot of student volunteers now too, by the way. I mean, as we've really ramped up promoting the gardens to the campus and community, we have a lot of students who want to volunteer. Sure. And some of them end up applying for jobs and getting jobs in the gardens.
Awesome. That's, and talk about a holistic experience for the student, let's get involved with the campus community. So there are 2, in my mind, there's many ways to support, but the ones that really stand out to me are those who support with their time and then those who support with their funds. Right. The donors that we work with, we know that the gardens have amazing donors in terms of who support the gardens with financial. What are some areas within the gardens that donors watching this could look at, come out and see, support? What are some areas that stick out in your mind that could use some financial support in the years to come here?
Thank you for asking, giving me an opportunity to talk about it. So as you know, I think we are largely self-funded. CNAS provides about 3 positions. They've been generous and steady in funding the gardens. And in the early days, that was sufficient. But we now have 10 staff and 7 additional students. And we raise all the funds to pay everyone besides the ones that CNAS supports. And so donors are a major part of that. We have a membership program, and we have benefits for members that supports the gardens. And of course, the volunteers provide in their labor and their time and love what money would provide in hiring someone. So I include them as donors.
Of course.
And we also raise revenue. But over the last few years, we've really, with the support of donors and the help of volunteers, we've sort of caught up on all the things we needed to do, from maintenance, deferred maintenance, and we really are moving forward with new projects.
Great.
And so the areas, obviously staff funding and salaries for students is a big area of support. But we have a new initiative now to renovate the irrigation systems in the gardens, which are in some cases 60 years old. And any homeowner knows that is not a recipe for success.
That's right.
And what we are doing, our manager is very well trained and has expertise in irrigation. And so he's redoing irrigation in beds for drip irrigation, water-wise irrigation, automatic time clocks. And so there's a fair amount of expense in just installing modern, automated, water-efficient irrigation. So that's one big project. Another big project that we really want to move forward with that is quite costly, actually, is a better program of tree maintenance. with pruning and limbing and also cleaning areas around our trees so that they're healthiest and show the best, because we have a huge number of planted trees in the gardens. And then an area that really is special to me is that we're ready to embark on is a program of interpretive signage. We've got now maps and signposts and all kinds of things in the gardens, waypoints. But what we really need, most gardens have, is a program of signage that explains why we have a desert garden, Southwest Desert, and why is it next to the Old World Desert, and why are they similar looking? And, why is this planted here, and what does it mean? So people that come in can really learn more than just the name of the plant, but what are they learning about this whole ecosystem? So that's a program that I'm just really keen to do.
Of course. And you don't know these things by necessarily walking around. So I'm glad that you were able to share about what specific needs how to be supported. Yeah. And
as a botanist, I see this, but I want to impart that on people.
You have to. And if they ever have any questions, always they can reach out to you via email.
Absolutely.
In case that they want to have one-on-one conversations, which I feel is very, very important to have, and something that I could facilitate, but speaking to you directly is always.
As you can tell, I'll talk to anybody about the gardens. It is just my passion.
Certainly.
And I might back up just a second and say, when you were talking about donors and I was talking about how we raise funds, one of our newer initiatives over the last few years is not only a revenue generating program, but we're a nonprofit. We can't make a lot of money, but it's more of a PR program. And we now have a whole series of branded items with a beautiful logo created by the UCR media team. And this is our brand of the gardens. Of course, we have an official UCR logo, but this is our brand. And we love selling these items online on our website because people will see it and say, where is this garden? Where is UCR? And in fact, on a camping trip one time, I had on my UCR Botanic Gardens t-shirt, and a man walked up to me and said, I'm an alumnus and I visited the gardens.
Wow.
I know it was 600 miles away.
Wow.
So these are really great items for us to promote the gardens and just spread the word more widely than we can in the gardens.
Absolutely. And in terms of ways to give or where they can, folks can give, I will put that link in this video description specifically. So we're not over here guessing or anything like that. Make sure to put that link in the description. But this is great. Is this fairly new? Did this come out just recently, or has this been out for a while?
We've been building our portfolio of merchandise over the last about 4 years. These green shirts we just got them last week. This about, a few months ago, we got these beautiful garden flags that
really nice.
Everyone who works there now has in his or her yard.
Really nice.
Another thing, coffee cups, water bottles. Another thing we just did, I think one of the things we were most proud of when I first started was actually developing brochures. Every garden needs a brochure with a map and all that. And we now have a whole series of them. We just got these printed this week. These are actually not a full brochure. It's a one-page flyer with information about the gardens that we are going to put downtown at places like the Mission Inn or the airport, so that people coming into town looking for something to do will learn about the gardens there come. Because we are now pretty widely known, and this will tell people how to get here, how to get involved, if they want to visit, donate, whatever, tell their friends.
Absolutely. That's great. When it comes to, as we wrap it up here, any heartwarming story that sticks out to you about, if it's a visitor, a donor, a supporter, any story that you have come across that really touched your heart when it comes to the gardens, if you would like to share that at this time, this would be a great way to kind of close.
I would love to. And what I would say is every time I walk out in the gardens, which is far too infrequent, I'm usually in my office, I hear a story. But this occurred last November at our Art in the Gardens, a big art event in the fall that brings in about 1,000 people. And I was sitting at the gate greeting people that came in, and a large family came in with a student, his parents, his sister, and what looked like his grandfather, who had on a UCR shirt. So I spoke to the grandfather and I said, "Oh, you went to UCR?" And he said, "I was the first graduating botanist at UCR."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "That's my department." And he said, "Well, then you would know Dr. Vasic." And I said, He was the first director of the Botanic Gardens. I'm getting chills telling this story. I mean, the connection there. And so he had told his children, and their son goes to school here. Those are the kinds of connections that I think people have with UCR. They want their children and grandchildren to come, and they come back to visit. So,
and if it really wasn't for the gardens, that connection would have never happened.
No, because really, I mean, UCR has grown, the campus has grown, and there are a lot of lovely open spaces now. But for decades, when people on campus wanted to get out and walk around and just refresh or go out between classes, they knew the gardens were a place you could just walk over and sit on a bench or on a rock and just veg out before you went back to work or class. So.
Well, that is certainly a heartwarming story that is fitting for the conclusion of this particular episode. Dr. Holt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And like I said, kicking off the first episode, and there'll be many more to come, but couldn't be happier that you were our first guest. And for those who are watching, thank you all for being here with us today. Certainly a great conversation with Dr. Holt. And if you like this type of content, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up to support. With that being said, we had a lot of fun here today. We're going to go ahead and close it out. So we will see you next time. Stay safe and take care. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here for the latest and greatest from CNAS Stories. And if you feel led to give to the organization that you saw highlighted in this interview, click the link in the description below and give today.